So I want to take this time that I have with all of you to challenge you to change your perspective on a number of things and how you think about things. And so the way I will begin this talk is with a series of questions for you. And the first question being, how many of you went to school because you chose to? Yes. And then the second thing is, when you did have a choice, what was the process you went through in making those choices? Obviously, K through 12, we don't really have a choice, which I will get into that in a few minutes. Beyond that, you do have a choice. And so then the first thing is, what was the process behind making that choice? Was it career ambition? Was it personal goals? Was it default? Or in some cases, with many of us, there was a cute co-ed in the subject that we wanted to study. Okay? And so what I want to ask you also is the following, is how many of you are in a job right now that existed when you were in school? And furthermore, how many of you can easily identify what you learned in school, especially K through 12, the actual work is useful for what you are doing right now? Okay? Now, taking that, what I'd like to do is look at school in general. So let's turn back the clock a little bit and let's look at why do schools exist? So there are a number of historical, analytical, rational reasons why schools exist. One was because there was a belief that if you had a more educated populace, it was going to encourage greater participation in the democratic process. The idea was that we would make thought-resulting decisions as part of our participation in our governmental processes. The next element to that was education shifted to some degree as a response to the needs of the marketplace, i.e. the industrial age. So you think about the industrial age, what was needed? You needed clearly definable tasks that were compartmentalized that served a specific purpose. That sound familiar about school? Clearly definable subjects that are compartmentalized with a specific set of tasks that are completed and you've achieved, okay? Now, the reason why I say all of this is because what I would like to see happen, and I see it happening to some degree, and I've even hear it in some of our previous speakers, is I would like to take a complete shift in the way that we look at education and learning. And the reason why I would like to take that shift is because of the following. What I would contend is that it is far more important for us to foster and embody a mindset and not a skill set. Okay? And embody a mindset and not a skill set. And here are the reasons why. What our students are learning right now, can we predict that the skill sets they will have now will be useful for them when they go out into the workforce later? We cannot. We can assume, we can guess, we can't predict. However, a mindset transcends time, transcends generations. And in turn, by doing that, if we are able to embody or encourage our students to embody a specific mindset, which I'll get into that shortly, what we're truly doing is we're making them what I would call future ready. Okay? So, what is future ready? Well, what I would say is it is the embodiment of certain characteristics. And those characteristics I've outlined in what I call the 3 E's. And yes, it extends beyond those, but I want to just focus down on just these 3, for example. And I call them the 3 E's because they are 3 distinct areas that we are all very familiar with, but it's not what these individual components do, it's what the mindset is that is involved in it. So the first one I'll say is the explorer. You think in history, you think currently. What are the characteristics of an explorer? They're anyone and a combination of all of the following. Desire for the unknown, keyword being desire. Willingness to accept risk, that also comes with reward. A thirst for knowledge that either is not easily accessible or that is accessible but you want more. In addition to an embodiment of a spiritual connection to going to where others have not gone. Okay? That's the explorer. The next one, the engineer. not an engineer, but the characteristics of an engineer. They are the following: having understanding of complex systems, having an understanding of the minor details that make up the complex systems, being able to identify the relationships between those minor details and the bigger picture, being willing to make calculated risks, and understanding, or at least having the embodiment that risk and failure is not a means to an end. It is just a part of the learning process. Okay? That's the engineer. And the third one, the entrepreneur. What are the characteristics of an entrepreneur? Number one, willing to take risks. Y'all notice something when I'm saying that? Willing to take risks. Accepting failure as a part of the process, not a means to an end. Taking chances on doing things that others, in some cases, are not willing to take or that have taken, but you are willing to go one step further. And in fact, one of my favorite entrepreneurs in the world today is Richard Branson. If you look at his history and what he's done, and the fact that he has a lot of money, but yet he's still willing to take chances and do things that many others are not. Okay? So the entrepreneur is, again, willing to take risks, recognizing that failure is a component of the process and not a means to an end. And we don't have time for me to get into it in much detail here, but I'm a big advocate for process, not product, because the process is where you get the mindset and you learn. It's not the end result. It's the process, or it's the journey. Okay, and so then with the entrepreneur, the other element to that is taking things that exist and turning them into your own. So now think about those 3 E's with the way that we have our educational system set up and the way our students learn. If you learn a specific skill set, it may or may not work later. Okay? How many of us had to take a foreign language when we were in high school? Okay? How many of us are still using that foreign language? However, if you adopt the mindset of the explorer, what you have is you have a scenario similar to what I can relate to. Was I studied Spanish in high school, but my very first trip to France, I felt crippled because I couldn't speak French. I had the explorer mentality. I was willing to go because there were many things that I wanted to see. That was my first trip outside of the U.S. Except my mindset was, I now know what I want to learn. As soon as I got back home, I took 2 years of French. Okay? Skill set can be learned. What was my mindset that said, okay, you went here, you recognized something that didn't work, and what are you going to do about it? Okay? Now, the other thing I will share with all of you as far as a personal story is, when I was in school, I was on the model that I shared with you. Specific set of skills, specific tasks, get a specific grade. In fact, I remember I used to always ask the teachers a question, which many of our students ask us now. What do I need to do to get an A? Just tell me what I need to do. Lay it all out on the syllabus, and I know if I do all these things, I got an A. Do I actually learn anything during that? That's debatable. But I knew exactly what I needed to do to get an A. Okay? What's happening is I did that. I chose a career path in teaching, and of course I thought, well, shoot, it worked for me. It's going to work for the kids. So I did the exact same thing to my students that was done to me. But what happened at some point was, with my connections with trusted colleagues, mentors, and quite frankly, was mentioned earlier, use of social media, okay, was I started realizing that way of teaching and learning is not necessarily effective now. In fact, what is more effective now, again, is a mindset over a skill set and leveraging the use of things like technology to foster that, to encourage the kids to explore. And keep in mind, exploration is not limited to just a physical movement from one place to another. Now, some of the speakers mentioned earlier about kids using Minecraft to go and do something different. That's exploration, okay? The next component for me was, okay, if that's exploration, how does engineering fit into it? Well, with many of my students, it was a function of using things like photography or graphic design. How do different small pieces work together to give you the big picture? Even with video production, how do individual scenes make up a movie? Or individual shots make up scenes that make up a movie? And then finally, with the entrepreneurial spirit with my students, it was, which I'm a staunch believer in, it was show your work, making thinking visible. Put it out there, take chances, and what I used to tell the students was you need to learn to be able to take a punch. And what I mean by that is the more work you put out, the more feedback you get. Some of those negative criticisms that used to affect you, the more you put it out there, the less they will affect you. Which means that you recognize that there are risks, failures, and challenges along the way, but it doesn't allow you to deviate from your path. Those were the 3 E's, and that's how they translated for me in the classroom. And yes, I admit to all of you here, and it's on camera. Did I start off that way? No. But there was an epiphany, and it was due in no small part to the connections that I had because of technology with trusted colleagues, with mentors, that clicked into my head, I'm doing this completely wrong. And the reason why I share all that with you and that personal story with you is that in many cases we are encouraged to make changes and to do something different. But what happens to a lot of us in education, we feel like we're on an island. And we feel like, okay, well, the changes I can make, well, they won't be that big because it's only with my, 100, 150, or some of us are in bigger districts, 250 students I see a day. But what we don't realize is that if all of us independently or codependently are starting to make some of these shifts and starting to share it out, starting to utilize things like technology, say, hey, I've been doing this. Oh, you know what? I'm doing it too. And you start doing that, and what happens? You start seeing it spread. And I would say that is what we equate to being viral, is doing that. And so with that being said, what I would encourage all of you to do is to look at ways in which you can take your learning environment, whether you work directly with students or you work with folks that work with students, take their learning environment and encourage the students to do any one and all of the following. How do we go from skill set to mindset? In any one of the following. You don't study history, you think like a historian. You don't study math, you think like a mathematician. You don't study science, you think like a scientist. Changing it. Not the skill set, the mindset. And ultimately, if we're able to do all of these things, and we're able to have students embody or to adopt the embodiment of those 3 E's, the explorer, the engineer, the entrepreneur, what we're truly doing is we are giving our students a foundational mindset that will actually give them a better opportunity for being future ready. So with that, what I will say with all of you is, I want my kids to be future ready. I want all kids to be future ready. Who's with me? Thank you.